It was supposed to be the best night of their lives. The lights, the music, the slow dances under glittering streamers. But by sunrise, 3 students from Ridgeview High were gone, and no one has ever figured out why. Before we dig in, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what I'm about to tell you. Back in the fall of year 1995, Ridgeview High School was buzzing about one thing: the annual fall formal. It wasn't prom. Prom was for seniors. But this was still the event that got everyone dressing up, taking cheesy photos, and making memories they thought they'd laugh about years later. No one could have guessed that it would become a night the town has tried to forget. Here's the thing: when you look at the missing persons report, when you read the police notes, and when you hear what witnesses claim they saw that night, none of it lines up neatly. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, where half the pieces are from another box entirely. And to this day, families are still asking the same question: how do 3 healthy, normal teenagers vanish between the school gym and the parking lot without a trace? Let's rewind to the start of that day. Ridgeview High sat on the edge of a small town in Illinois, surrounded by miles of farmland. It wasn't exactly the kind of place where crime made headlines. The biggest drama usually came from football rivalries or rumors about who was dating who. That's why, when students started showing up at the gym on the evening of the 21st of October, 1995, no one thought they'd be walking into the kind of story you only see in crime documentaries decades later. The missing kids? Their names were Emily Turner, 17, Jacob Miles, 18, and Claire Davidson, 16. They weren't all best friends. In fact, they barely hung out outside of school. But their timelines crossed in strange ways that night, ways that would later make investigators wonder if the disappearances were connected or just a horrifying coincidence. Emily was a straight-A student. She'd been on the yearbook committee, and that night she was supposed to be taking photos of the dance. Jacob? He was the type of guy who didn't take school seriously but was somehow liked by everyone. He'd just gotten a used red pickup truck, which he parked proudly right near the gym entrance. Claire was the shy one. She didn't even plan to go to the dance at first, but changed her mind when her friend begged her to tag along. When you look at the guest list, about 220 students attended that night. Teachers and a few parents were stationed at the doors. The principal, Mr. Lawson, was making his usual awkward attempts to blend in with the music. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. What's so strange is that the 3 of them were seen separately throughout the night. Emily was spotted near the bleachers with her camera. Jacob was outside smoking with a couple of friends. Claire was sitting alone at a table near the snack bar, texting on her beeper. Yes, it was the mid-92nd, and texting meant sending numbers and codes that only your friends understood. At 9:43 p.m., according to one witness, Emily left the gym through the side door. No one knows why. Jacob was last seen at around 10:15 p.m., heading toward the parking lot. Claire's last confirmed sighting was around 10:30 p.m., walking toward the bathrooms, but she never came back. The police timeline says that between 10:30 and 11 p.m., all 3 simply disappeared. No security cameras, no witnesses who saw them leave together, no signs of a struggle. Just gone. And here's where things start to get really unsettling. Months later, each of their families received anonymous letters. The handwriting was different on each one, but the message, almost identical. Each one read, "They know what happened that night. They just won't tell you." The police didn't even realize the 3 were missing until almost midnight. In 1995, schools didn't have the same protocols they do now. Chaperones assumed kids were just leaving early with friends. Nobody thought to do a head count, not until Emily's parents showed up outside, waiting in the cold, scanning the crowd of students spilling out into the parking lot. When they couldn't find her, they asked the teachers. That's when someone remembered that Jacob hadn't been seen in over an hour. Then a friend of Claire's nervously told a teacher she'd been looking for her since the bathroom break, and she never came back. The local police arrived quickly. At first, they treated it like a case of teenagers skipping out. Maybe they'd gone to a late-night diner, maybe a party. But Emily's car was still in the lot. Claire's coat was still on the back of her chair inside the gym. Jacob's red pickup truck still sitting under the streetlight keys inside. That was the first red flag. Teenagers don't just abandon their cars, their coats, and their friends without saying a word. By 1:30 a.m., search parties were combing the fields and wooded areas around the school. Dogs were brought in, flashlights cut through the tall grass, but there was nothing, not even a footprint leading away from the lot. Then came the conflicting witness statements. One student swore they saw Emily talking to a man in a dark hoodie near the side of the gym around 9:45 p.m. Another insisted she was in the bathroom line at exactly that time. Someone else claimed they saw Jacob driving away around 10:20, which was impossible, since his truck was right where he'd left it. And Claire, one freshman said she saw her crying near the vending machines, while another said she was laughing with a group of seniors outside. Every time detectives tried to pin down a timeline, the details slipped away like water through their fingers. Detective Harold Finch, the lead investigator, later admitted in an interview, "It was one of the most frustrating nights of my career. Every witness seemed sure of what they saw, and every one of them contradicted the other." By morning, the case was already strange enough to make local headlines. 3 students missing in one night. No trace, no ransom note, no reason. But what came next made it even stranger. 2 days later, the janitor, Mr. Wills, told police something he'd been keeping to himself. He'd been cleaning the cafeteria around 11 p.m., well after the dance ended, when he heard a loud bang near the back service door. Thinking it was just kids messing around, he went to check, but saw nothing. What he did notice, though, was a set of muddy shoe prints leading from that door into the dark field beyond the football stadium. The prints ended just 20 feet out, like someone had stepped into thin air. And if that wasn't weird enough, police found something else in that same spot. A single silver earring. Emily's mother confirmed it was hers. Now the investigation had a focal point, that muddy patch of ground. But here's where they hit another wall. It had rained lightly earlier that evening. The mud should have recorded every step, but there were no drag marks, no tire tracks, no scattered debris, just those few footprints, and then nothing. Detective Finch began to suspect the 3 hadn't left willingly. He called in the state police, thinking maybe they were dealing with an abduction. But how do you abduct 3 teenagers in the middle of a school event without a single person noticing? And where do you take them without leaving any sign? By the end of the first week, more than 100 volunteers had searched every barn, abandoned house, and drainage ditch within a 5-mile radius. Nothing. Then, exactly 7 days after they vanished, Emily's parents received the first anonymous letter. They know what happened that night. They just won't tell you. No envelope, no return address, just folded and shoved under their front door. In the days after the dance, Ridgeview High looked wrong. The hallways were quieter. Lockers slammed less often. Even the usual gossip seemed muted. It was as if everyone was walking around waiting for an answer that never came. The missing posters were everywhere, taped to the glass doors of the cafeteria, stapled to telephone poles along Main Street, even tacked to the bulletin board in the local diner where the regulars sat in the same booths every morning. Emily's smile was the first thing people noticed. Jacob's picture showed him holding up a fish he'd caught last summer, grinning like he'd just won a prize. Claire's looked like it had been cropped from a yearbook photo. She wasn't smiling in that one, just staring into the camera like she'd rather be anywhere else. Police had started calling the case the Ridgeview 3. In a town this size, giving it a name felt heavy, like it wasn't going away anytime soon. And it wasn't that. Detective Finch set up a small task force. They turned the school gym into a kind of command center. Long tables with maps, lists of names, printouts of the guest list from the dance. He had a theory early on that someone in that gym either saw something or was responsible. So they started talking to everyone. The first interviews were with chaperones. Mrs. Young, the English teacher, said she'd been near the punch table most of the night. She remembered seeing Emily by the bleachers, fiddling with her camera strap, but didn't think anything of it. She said Emily looked distracted, glancing toward the side exit like she was waiting for someone. Mr. Lawson, the principal, claimed he saw Jacob at around 10:15 p.m., leaning against the wall outside the gym doors, but didn't see who he was talking to. He assumed it was a classmate. And then there was Coach Dempsey, who told police something odd at around 10:25 p.m. He saw Claire walking quickly toward the hallway that led to the locker rooms. She wasn't in her heels anymore. She was barefoot, holding them in one hand. He remembered because it was cold that night, and the tile floor there was freezing. He'd called out to ask if she was all right, but she didn't answer, just kept walking. When detectives followed up with the student body, they got stories that tangled the timeline even more. Some claimed they'd seen Emily outside talking to a tall guy in a hoodie. Others swore Jacob left the gym alone and walked toward the parking lot like he was meeting someone. A few remembered seeing Claire crying near the vending machines. But then, another group swore she was laughing with a friend by the DJ booth only minutes later. It didn't help that in 1995, no one had a smartphone to check timestamps, no security cameras in the gym, no photos from that exact moment to cross-reference. Memory was all they had, and memory is slippery. Then there was the field. By now, the muddy footprints behind the service door were starting to bother Detective Finch. The set that belonged to Emily, confirmed by her shoe size and tread pattern, led about 20 feet into the grass. Then, nothing. No turn marks, no trampled weeds. It was as if she'd been walking toward the open field and simply vanished. They brought in a search dog again, hoping to trace the scent further. The dog followed the path, sniffed the air, and then stopped dead at the same point where the footprints ended. It just sat down, whining. One of the officers joked that it was like she'd been beamed up by a UFO. Finch didn't laugh. And here's the thing, that muddy patch wasn't far from the old maintenance shed. The shed had been locked for years, its windows boarded over. No one on staff had a key. But when officers tried the padlock, it wasn't locked at all, just hanging there. Inside, it smelled of damp wood and oil. Rusted tools lined the walls. And in the far corner, under a pile of tarp, they found something strange. A single men's work boot, size 11, caked with fresh mud. No one could trace it to any staff or volunteer. It didn't match any known suspects. When they dusted it for prints, they found nothing. Wiped clean. That's when Finch started to suspect this wasn't the work of an amateur. The case was still less than 2 weeks old when the second anonymous letter arrived, this time to Jacob's parents. It was nearly identical to the one Emily's family had gotten. They know what happened that night. They just won't tell you. By the second week, the Ridgeview 3 case had turned into something the town couldn't escape from. Local news vans were parked along the school's front lawn. Reporters stopped parents in the grocery store aisles, shoving microphones in their faces. The once sleepy town was suddenly under a magnifying glass, and everyone felt it. Detective Harold Finch didn't like the attention. He was old school, the kind of cop who preferred to work leads quietly, but he couldn't stop the headlines. 3 teens vanish at dance, no clues found. Parents beg for answers in Ridgeview mystery. The media attention was good for getting the word out, but it also stirred the pot. Suddenly, tips were pouring in, hundreds of them, and almost every one was useless. The first search wave. The search for Emily, Jacob, and Claire was methodical at first. Volunteers, police officers, and even the local Boy Scout troop were divided into grid teams. They searched the woods, drainage ditches, barns, and old grain silos within a 10-mile radius. Farmers opened their land without hesitation, letting strangers comb through their cornfields row by row. The K-9 units were brought in again, focusing on the field behind the school where Emily's footprints stopped. This time, they also swept the football field, the bleachers, and the service road that ran behind the property. But every trail went cold within 100 yards. A volunteer firefighter named Russ Miller later told the newspaper that the weirdest part of the whole thing was how empty it felt. You expect to find something, a dropped purse, a scrap of clothing, anything, but it was like the ground just swallowed them. Questioning the students. Over the next few days, detectives interviewed almost everyone who'd been at the dance. They didn't just ask where people were, they wanted to know what they heard, what they smelled, even what songs were playing when they last saw the missing kids. That's how they pieced together some of the more unsettling fragments. One girl swore she heard someone screaming faintly during a slow song, but assumed it was just kids messing around outside. A junior named Kyle admitted he saw Jacob standing next to his truck earlier that night, talking to someone in a dark vehicle that wasn't familiar. He couldn't describe the driver, said the windows were tinted, but he remembered the sound of the engine, a low, uneven idle, like it was running rough. Another student claimed she saw Claire in the locker room hallway, pacing back and forth and checking her watch. The trouble was, none of these sightings matched up in time. If Jacob was talking to a stranger in the parking lot at 10:20 p.m., how could another witness claim he was inside joking with friends at the same time? Digging into the families. When the leads weren't adding up, Finch turned to the families. If the kids had been in trouble, maybe it started at home. Emily's parents, Mark and Linda Turner, swore their daughter had no enemies and no reason to run away. She'd been planning to apply to Northwestern University and had spent that very afternoon picking out her dress for senior portraits. Linda was the one who recognized the silver earring found in the field. She told police Emily never left the house without both earrings, meaning she probably lost it during the night of the dance. Jacob's mom, Denise Miles, admitted her son wasn't perfect. He'd skipped school a few times, hung out with older kids, and liked to push boundaries. But she insisted he'd never just leave without saying something. She also revealed something the police found interesting. 2 weeks before the dance, Jacob had gotten into a fight with a man at a local gas station. She didn't know the details, only that Jacob came home angry and wouldn't talk about it. Claire's father, Richard Davidson, painted a different picture. His daughter was shy, yes, but lately she'd been acting strange, more secretive, more withdrawn. She'd been spending a lot of time in her room on the phone. When he asked who she was talking to, she'd just smile and say, "You don't know them." That comment stuck in Finch's mind. The first dead ends. On the 28th of October, exactly 1 week after the disappearance, a local man called in a tip. He claimed he'd seen 3 teenagers walking along Route 19 late that night. He couldn't be sure, but thought they matched the descriptions. Police swarmed the area, searching every ditch and side road. They even brought in a helicopter with a spotlight. Nothing. Then another tip came in about a cabin near the lake, supposedly abandoned, but known as a hangout for teens. Inside they found empty beer bottles, cigarette butts, and graffiti. But nothing to link it to Emily, Jacob, or Claire. By Halloween, frustration was setting in. The case wasn't moving forward. Every lead fizzled out. And then, the third letter arrived. This time, it was slid under the Davidson family's door at 3 a.m. Richard woke up to the sound of it hitting the floor. He rushed outside, but saw no one, just empty street under the glow of a flickering lamp. The letter was the same. They know what happened that night. They just won't tell you. But now there was something new. At the bottom, in small letters, someone had written, "Ask the janitor." The words, "Ask the janitor," hit Detective Finch like a gut punch. Up until then, the investigation had been focused outward strangers, possible abduction, maybe even the idea of the kids running away. But this note pointed inward, towards someone who'd been there the whole time. The janitor's name was Thomas Wills, 53 years old, wiry, with a permanent stoop from decades of mopping floors and hauling trash. He'd worked at Ridgeview High for nearly 15 years. Most people in town knew him in passing, the quiet man pushing the broom after basketball games, the one who locked up after school events. And he had already been part of the story. He was the one who reported the muddy footprints behind the service door that led nowhere, the one who found Emily's earring. When Finch brought Wills in for questioning again, he didn't seem nervous, just tired. "Mr. Wills," Finch said, sliding the note across the table, "you want to explain this?" The janitor stared at it for a long moment. "I didn't write it." "Then why would someone tell us to talk to you?" Wills leaned back in his chair. "Because I saw something I didn't want to get involved in." The janitor's story. According to Wills, on the night of the dance, he'd been making his usual rounds after cleaning the cafeteria. Around 10:40 p.m., he walked past the hallway that led to the locker rooms, the same hallway Coach Dempsey had seen Claire in, barefoot, holding her shoes. "I saw Jacob there," Wills said. "He wasn't alone." "Who was he with?" Finch pressed. "A man I'd never seen before, tall, wearing a black hoodie. They were standing close, like they were arguing." "What were they arguing about?" "I couldn't hear the words, but the man put his hand on Jacob's shoulder, not in a friendly way." Wills claimed he ducked out of sight, not wanting to get involved. When he came back a minute later, they were gone. He assumed Jacob had just left early. "And Emily?" Finch asked. Wills hesitated. "She came through that hallway about 5 minutes later, looked around, like she was searching for someone. She was headed toward the service door when I saw her. That's when I heard the noise, the bang from outside. I went to check, and by the time I got there, the door was swinging shut. Emily was gone." "And Claire?" "That's the thing. I never saw her. Not once that night." A problem of proof. If Wills was telling the truth, this was the first concrete account of Jacob being with someone who didn't belong at the dance. But there was no proof, no cameras, no other witnesses willing to back it up. Wills had waited 2 weeks to share this, which made Finch wonder if he was hiding something. Was he protecting someone or himself? The more Finch pressed, the less the janitor had to say. His answers got shorter. His eyes darted toward the door. When word of Will's new testimony leaked, and in a small town, it always leaks, the rumors started. Parents whispered about how much time he spent alone in the school, after hours. Students told stories about how he'd watch them from the doorway during detention. Most of it was probably exaggerated, but it didn't matter. By the first week of November, Wills had been placed on administrative leave. The family's frustration. The Turners, the Mileses, and the Davidsons were growing more vocal. They started showing up at press conferences, demanding more answers from the police. Emily's father, Mark, accused Finch of chasing shadows while ignoring real leads. Denise Miles told a reporter she believed her son was still alive and that someone in town knew exactly where he was. Claire's father, Richard, was more direct. He confronted Finch outside the station one morning. "You're looking at the wrong people," Richard said. "You think a janitor can make 3 kids disappear in 20 minutes? This was planned. This was bigger." And the pressure cooker. By mid-November, the tension in Ridgeview was boiling over. Students were pulled from school. Teachers were refusing to chaperone future events without more security. The police department was stretched thin. Every officer was working overtime, chasing tips that led nowhere. And then, something strange happened. A student named Amanda Briggs came forward, a junior who'd been working the snack table at the dance. She claimed she'd seen a black van parked on the side road behind the school around 10:15 p.m. "It wasn't a school van," Amanda said. "It had no logos, no markings, just plain black, with tinted windows. And the engine was running. When she glanced back 5 minutes later, it was gone. No one else reported seeing it. But combined with Wills's story about the man in the hoodie, Finch felt a chill. What if the van was where they were taken? The new problem. Even with these new pieces, the janitor's account, the black van, the letters Finch, had nothing solid. Every clue was frustratingly incomplete. No plate number for the van. No identification for the man in the hoodie. No physical evidence from the field or the shed. It was like chasing smoke, and the longer it went on, the colder the trail got. Worse, the anonymous letters stopped after the one to the Davidsons. Whoever was sending them had gone silent. Finch had to face a reality he hated. Without new evidence, the Ridgeview 3 case was in danger of going cold before the year was even out. If you looked at Ridgeview from the outside in late 1995, you might think it was holding together. The Christmas lights still went up. The Friday night football games still drew a crowd. The little diner on Main Street still served coffee with a slice of pie for $2. But beneath the surface, the place was splitting. The Ridgeview 3 weren't just names on posters anymore. They'd become a dividing line. You were either convinced the danger was still out there, or you were convinced it was sitting across from you in church. Theories start to take over. The police had 3 main working theories, but each had holes big enough to drive a truck through. Theory 1. Stranger abduction. The idea was simple. A predator, possibly the man in the hoodie, lured one kid out at a time. Jacob first, then Emily while she was looking for him, and Claire last. Maybe the black van Amanda saw was the getaway vehicle. Problem was, Ridgeview wasn't a place where strangers could just hang around without someone noticing, and no one else remembered seeing that van, except Amanda. Theory 2. Inside Job. This one gained steam after the Ask the Janitor note. If someone inside the school staff, student, even a parent volunteer had planned this, they'd have the access and knowledge to pull it off without being seen. The old maintenance shed and the forgotten underground service entrance became part of this theory. But why? What would be the motive for a local to abduct 3 teens who weren't even close friends? Theory 3. Runaway pact. This one didn't sit well with anyone who knew the kids. It was floated because, in some rare cases, teens do vanish together to start new lives. The police checked bus stations, train depots, and airports within 200 miles. Nothing. Plus, leaving behind cars, coats, and personal items made no sense. New suspects. The janitor, Thomas Wills, wasn't officially cleared, but there were others who caught Finch's attention. 1. The expelled senior. In the spring of 2095, a senior named Brett Holloway was kicked out for fighting and drug possession. Brett had a grudge against the school and a history of showing up at events he wasn't allowed to attend. A classmate claimed she saw someone who looked like Brett near the service door the night of the dance. When questioned, Brett admitted he was in town that night, but denied going near the school. His alibi, playing cards at a friend's house, couldn't be confirmed. 2. The gas station man. Remember the man Jacob fought with 2 weeks before the dance? Police finally tracked him down, a trucker named Vince Carter, who passed through town on occasion. Vince claimed the argument was over nothing more than a parking space. But when asked where he was on the 21st of October, he said he was on the road somewhere in Indiana. No receipts, no witnesses. 3. The van owner. A month after Amanda's sighting, police found a black van matching her description parked behind a repair shop in a neighboring town. It belonged to a man named Earl Thompson, a part-time mechanic. He admitted being in Ridgeview once or twice, but denied ever parking near the school. The van's carpet was stained and smelled of mildew, but no trace evidence linked it to the kids. The forgotten tunnel. Then came the strangest lead of all. While digging through old building plans for Ridgeview High, Finch noticed something odd, an underground service tunnel that ran from the boiler room to a small outbuilding near the football field. It had been built in the 1962 for maintenance access, then sealed off in the 82nd after budget cuts. At least, it was supposed to be sealed. When police pried open the hatch in the boiler room, the metal groaned and flaked rust onto the floor. Inside, the air was stale and damp. The tunnel was barely wide enough for one person to walk through, and in some spots, you had to crouch. About halfway down, they found something lodged in the grime, a broken piece of camera strap. Emily had been carrying her school camera that night. Paranoia in the town. The tunnel discovery only deepened the town's unease. If someone had used it to move the kids without being seen, it meant the abductor either worked at the school or knew it better than most staff. Parents started keeping their kids home. Businesses installed extra locks. People began looking at their neighbors differently. At night, the Turners kept their porch light on a silent beacon, in case Emily found her way back. Denise Miles started sleeping on the couch with the television on, afraid she'd miss a phone call. Richard Davidson spent hours driving the back roads outside town, convinced he might spot something the police had missed. And through it all, Finch kept coming back to the same problem. Every lead circled back to something or someone connected to Ridgeview High. By December, Ridgeview had turned into a rumor factory. Every time the wind rattled a loose shutter, or a dog barked at night, someone called the police. Some claimed to have seen the 3 missing students walking along country roads at dawn. Others swore they'd heard screams from the woods behind Miller's farm. Every tip was checked. Every single one came up empty. But then, something happened that made Finch believe the case wasn't just stalling, it was being played with. The break-in at Ridgeview High. It happened late on a Friday night, 3 weeks before Christmas. The school's alarm went off at 11:27 p.m. By the time officers arrived, the front doors were still locked, but one of the side doors, the same one Emily had been seen near the night of the dance, was propped open with a brick. Inside, the building was quiet. Nothing was stolen. No vandalism. But in the gym, on the polished wooden floor, someone had dragged a wet mop in looping patterns. It was just water, no cleaner, no smell, as if someone had been tracing circles for no reason. And in the center of the floor, left like a gift, was an old disposable camera. The film was still inside. When the photos were developed, they showed nothing but blurs and shadows, except for one shot a close-up of what looked like a shoe print on muddy ground. The shoe print analysis. Forensics matched the tread pattern to a generic men's sneaker sold in the mid-92nd. The size was estimated at 11, same as the work boot found in the shed. Finch couldn't shake the feeling that whoever left the camera wanted him to connect the dots, but only enough to keep chasing. It was like being led by breadcrumbs that could vanish in the next gust of wind. More theories take shape. With the break-in fresh in mind, the theories started mutating again. The stalker theory. Some locals believed one of the kids had been targeted for weeks, maybe months, by someone who lived nearby. The dance was just the moment they struck. The problem was, all 3 disappeared and no one could agree on which one might have been the main target. The wrong place, wrong time theory. Others thought maybe Jacob, Emily, and Claire had each stumbled into something dangerous that night, something not meant for them. It might explain why they weren't together when last seen. The multiple perpetrators theory. A few detectives in the state police quietly suggested that this could have been the work of more than one person. One lures Jacob, another intercepts Emily, another corners Claire. The coordination would explain how it all happened so fast, but also meant there was more than one dangerous person in town. The van tip revisited. Out of nowhere, Amanda Briggs, the same student who reported the black van, showed up at the station again. This time, she brought her older brother, who claimed he'd seen the van himself. But his story was different. He said he saw it parked near the railroad tracks a few days after the dance. The windows were down, and inside were stacks of folded blankets and a small cooler. No driver in sight. By the time he came back with a friend to check it out, the van was gone. Finch ordered another sweep for the vehicle, but again, it led nowhere. A new name surfaces. Just before Christmas break, an anonymous call came into the police tip line. The voice on the other end was male, calm, and deliberate. "They're not far," he said. "Look for the red door." The line went dead. The phrase stuck with Finch. There were plenty of barns, sheds, and shacks around Ridgeview, but very few had painted doors, let alone red ones. He made a list of every property in a 15-mile radius with that detail. One stood out, an abandoned service building near the old railway station, shut down since the late 72nd. The front had a single, weather-worn red door. The Red Door Search. On the 3rd of January, 1996, police entered the building. Inside, the air was damp and smelled faintly of mold. Dust lay thick on the floor. In one corner was an overturned metal chair. But the most chilling thing was on the far wall. 3 names, written in black marker. Emily, Jacob, Claire. Under each name was a date, the night of the dance, and under that, nothing, just blank space, like a sentence that had been cut off mid-thought. Finch knew they were close to something, but whether it was the truth or just another layer of misdirection, he couldn't yet tell. The abandoned service building with the red door became the center of Finch's investigation. For weeks, it was the only lead that felt tangible, something you could touch, smell, and stand inside, instead of a ghost of a memory or a rumor. But as thorough as the search had been, Finch couldn't shake the sense that they'd missed something. The return to the red door. On a gray morning in mid-January, Finch went back with a smaller team. No news cameras, no crowd. Just him, 2 officers, and a flashlight each. The building was the same, damp, silent, empty. But this time, Finch focused on the floor, scanning for irregularities. In the corner opposite the wall with the names, a stack of warped wooden pallets caught his eye. They were heavier than they looked. Beneath them was a rusted metal grate. When one of the officers pried it open, the smell hit first stale air mixed with something faintly metallic. Below was a concrete shaft, maybe 10 feet deep, leading into darkness. The drainage tunnel. The shaft connected to a narrow drainage tunnel, just wide enough for one person to crawl through. Judging by the cobwebs, no one had been in there for a while, or at least, no one who cared to clear the way. It took nearly half an hour for the officers to maneuver through the tunnel. The concrete walls were slick with condensation. Somewhere far ahead, the sound of dripping water echoed like a clock ticking in the dark. Then they reached a wider chamber, where runoff water collected before flowing out toward the old railway culvert. The beam of Finch's flashlight caught something floating near the wall. The first major physical clue. It was a scrap of fabric, deep burgundy, with tiny silver threads woven through it. When they pulled it out and laid it flat, there was no doubt. It matched the dress Claire had worn the night of the dance. The edges were torn, frayed, as if snagged on something, but there was no blood, no obvious sign of struggle, just a piece of her dress in a place no one had any reason to go. In the same chamber, wedged in a crack in the concrete, they found something else, a small, square pendant on a thin chain. Emily's mother confirmed it instantly. It had been a birthday gift, and Emily had worn it almost every day. The graffiti. Before they left, one of the officers noticed something on the tunnel wall, faint, half-faded letters scrawled in what looked like black marker. J.M., the 21st of October 2095. Jacob Miles's initials, the date of the dance. Whether it had been written by Jacob himself or by someone else, Finch couldn't tell. But it was the first time all 3 kids had been connected to the same place physically since the night they vanished. The frustrating reality. And yet, it didn't solve the case. The tunnel had multiple access points: the Red Door building, the railway culvert, and even a service hatch near the school grounds. Whoever used it could have moved freely without being seen, especially if they knew the layout. But the most maddening part was that none of the evidence could pinpoint when those items were left there. It could have been the night of the dance or weeks later. Forensics teams scoured the tunnel, but no fingerprints, no footprints, no DNA that could be tied to anyone outside the three victims. It was the biggest break of the case, and still, it felt like chasing shadows. The emotional toll. When Finch told the families, the reactions were gutting. Linda Turner collapsed into her husband's arms at the mention of Emily's necklace. Denise Miles gripped the table so hard her knuckles went white. Richard Davidson sat in silence, staring at the photo of the torn dress fabric. They wanted to know what it meant. Finch couldn't give them an answer. The discovery in the tunnel changed the tone of the investigation. No one could say the three had just wandered off anymore. Something had happened that night. Something premeditated, calculated, and cruel. And now, the race to find the truth was more urgent than ever. For days after the tunnel discovery, Finch barely slept. The necklace, the fabric, the initials on the wall. They were the first real pieces of the puzzle, but the more he looked at them, the more questions they raised. If the kids had been taken into that tunnel, how? The entrance under the red door was hidden. The railway culvert was nearly a mile from the school, and the service hatch near Ridgeview High had been rusted shut for years, or so everyone thought. The school hatch. Finch ordered the hatch near the school checked again. This time, instead of taking the custodian's word for it, the officers brought in a crowbar. The lock didn't resist. It was brand new, shiny, installed sometime in the last few months. Inside, the hatch led to a steep ladder down into a narrow corridor that joined the same drainage system they'd found under the red door. It meant someone had been using it recently, and that they could move between the school and that abandoned building without setting foot in public view. The implications made Finch's skin crawl. Whoever did this didn't just know the tunnel existed, they'd planned for it. A name from the past. While cross-referencing old maintenance records for Ridgeview High, Finch found a name he didn't recognize: Alan Keene. Keene had been a part-time maintenance contractor in the early 82nd, back when the tunnel was still in use. When Finch dug deeper, he found something else. Keene had been arrested in another county in 1987 for unlawful confinement. The charges were dropped when the victim refused to testify. Keene still lived in the state, just 2 hours away. The interview. Finch and 2 officers drove to Keene's small rental property. The man who answered the door was in his late 50s, thin, with deep lines in his face and eyes that darted constantly. At first, Keene claimed he hadn't been back to Ridgeview in decades, but when Finch mentioned the tunnel, his tone shifted. "You think I had something to do with those kids?" he said, almost amused. "I built that damn tunnel. I know it better than anyone. You think you're the first cop to come knocking about it?" Keene wouldn't elaborate, and without a warrant, Finch couldn't push further. But as they left, one of the officers swore he saw a pair of size 11 boots by the door, caked with dried mud. The overlooked detail. That night, Finch spread every photo, note, and diagram of the dance night across his kitchen table. He kept coming back to the gym layout, the exits, the timing of when each kid was last seen. Something clicked. All 3, Emily, Jacob, and Claire, had been last seen within 100 feet of the same service hallway, the one that led to the locker rooms, and, just beyond that, the maintenance hatch. It wasn't random. They hadn't been taken from 3 different spots around the school. They'd been funneled to one place. A chilling realization. Finch replayed the janitor's story in his head. Jacob with the man in the hoodie. Emily following minutes later. Claire barefoot and moving fast. What if they'd each been told something that made them go down that hallway willingly? And if the hatch was already unlocked, it would take seconds to disappear into it. The lead up to the push. With the connection clear, Finch knew the next move: stake out the tunnel. If the person who used it once still had access, maybe they'd come back. He assigned a small team to watch all three entrances: the school hatch, the Red Door building, and the railway culvert around the clock. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. And then, on a freezing February night, just past 2 a.m., a figure appeared near the Red Door.